The day I got the keys to my first house, my mother looked at me like I had stolen something from her. Not from a store, not from a neighbor. From her, from the family, from a plan I did not even know existed. I was 34 years old, standing in an empty kitchen on Linen Street holding those keys in one hand and my phone in the other. The screen was lit up with 11 missed calls, all from my parents, their landline, my mother's cell. My mother's cell again, and again. 11 times. I thought they were hurt. I thought maybe my mom wanted to cry happy tears, and my dad wanted to come check the water heater, because that is what my dad does. He fixes things. That is his whole language. I was wrong about all of it. 3 weeks later, an 8-year-old girl would sit on a kitchen stool next to me and tell me the truth. And what my family did after that would make losing a spare key look like a warm-up. Because my parents were not angry about what I bought. They were angry about what my sister was supposed to do with it. If you have ever been the person everybody leans on until your spine bends, this story is going to feel like someone read your diary. Before we go any further, do me one favor. Do me one favor. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from right now. City, state, country. I read every single one. And hit that subscribe button because the ending of this story is something you do not want to miss. I promise you that. Let me back up. Because you need to understand who I was in my family before you can understand what they did to me. My name is Diana Thornton. I am 34. I am a senior accountant at a firm in Dayton, Ohio. 12 years at the same desk. 9 of those years I lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, where every Tuesday smelled like other people's fabric softener. I made my coffee at home every morning. I drove a car with a crank window. I put money away every single month quietly the way some people pray, automatically, without asking anyone's permission, without announcing it. In my family, I was the one who handles things. Every spring, I did my parents' taxes. I did my Aunt Sharon's taxes. When my grandmother needed help with a Medicare form, they called me. When anyone in the family got a letter with a government seal on it, that letter ended up on my kitchen table. My sister Rachel used to joke that I was the family's free accountant and free notary and free therapist, and everyone would laugh. And I would laugh too, because that is what I did. I laughed and I handled it. Here is the thing nobody tells you about being the reliable one. In my family, reliable is not a compliment. It is a job assignment. There is no raise. There is no vacation. There is absolutely no quitting. You get hired at 12 years old and you find out about the retirement plan the hard way. For most of my life, I thought that job was the same thing as being loved. I balanced everyone's books, and I told myself the numbers proved I belonged. I told myself that if I kept handling things, they would keep me. That if I kept understanding, they would keep new choosing me. Standing in that empty kitchen with 11 missed calls, I had no idea my job description was about to expand. Because reliable, it turns out, came with housing duties. I just had not read that part of the contract yet. Nobody had shown it to me. They had only shown it to each other. Let me tell you about the pressure cooker my family was living in. My parents, Carol and Frank Thornton, own a 3-bedroom house on Warner Avenue about 15 minutes from my new place. My dad is 66, retired machinist, a man who barely talks unless something is broken. My mom is 63. She works part-time at the First Methodist Church office, which in our town is less a job and more a throne. 2 years ago, my sister Rachel's husband Mark lost his heating and cooling business. He had worked for himself for 6 years. Then suppliers got expensive. 2 big clients stiffed him on invoices, and it all came down slowly and then very fast, like watching a tree lean and then crack. 18 months ago, Rachel and Mark and their 3 kids moved into my parents' house. Rachel is 31. The kids are Ava, who is 8, Cody, who is 6, and June, who is 3. That is 7 people in a house built for 4. I watched it wear on all of them. I never said a word against it. I bought the kids' school supplies in August. I paid for Ava's summer camp and told Rachel it was a gift card promotion, which is not a real thing, but she did not check. I showed up with groceries and called it just passing by. I did what I always did. I handled the edges of it quietly so nobody had to ask. But that fall, my mother started asking me a strange question. She would wait until we were alone. Drying dishes, just the 2 of us. And she would say it casually, like she was asking about the weather. Have you looked at anything bigger, honey? Bigger. I lived alone above a laundromat. I remember thinking it was a funny word to keep landing on. It was not funny. It was a measurement. And I was being measured. I need to tell you about the babysitting box, because everything that happened this year started there. 22 years ago. When I was 12, I babysat for 2 families on our street. $5 an hour, which felt like a fortune. I kept the money in a shoebox in my closet under a sweater. I was saving for a blue 10-speed bike from the hardware store window. I counted that money the way other kids read comic books. Every night. Pulling the box out, touching the bills, adding it up. Getting closer. One Saturday in March, the water heater on Warner Avenue died. The same week my dad's hours got cut at the plant. I came home from school on Monday and the shoebox was light. Nobody had asked me. My mother sat me down at the kitchen table. She put her hand over mine. She explained that families pull together, that she knew I understood. Then, she said the sentence that built the next 22 years of my life. She turned to my dad and my aunt, and she said, "Diana understands." Diana always understands, and everyone smiled at me. I remember exactly how that smile felt to receive. It felt like being chosen. It felt like a trophy with my name engraved on it. So I smiled back. And I said the water heater was more important, and I never got the bike. And I learned the deal my family was offering. Understanding was the price of admission. Handling things was how I paid my dues. And if you ever stopped understanding, you did not get an argument. You got silence. And silence in my family is louder than anything. I spent the next 22 years being the girl who understands. I understood at 16 when my college fund helped pay for Rachel's braces. I understood at 25 when I co-signed my aunt's car loan. I understood at 30 when I gave up a promotion that would have required travel because my grandmother was sick and someone needed to be local. I understood until understanding was the only thing anyone thought I was for. The house on Linen Street was the first thing in my life I ever refused to hand over, and my family treated that refusal like a crime. I bought my house in secret, and I want to be honest about why. 3 years ago I bought a car. A sensible used sedan, the most boring purchase in America. I made the mistake of mentioning it at Sunday dinner before I signed the papers. My family turned it into a committee meeting. My dad had opinions about transmissions. Aunt Sharon knew a guy. My mother wanted me to wait until spring for reasons that were never explained and never needed to be. By the end of it, I was so worn down, I nearly bought the car my mother liked in a color I hated. So when I started house hunting last winter, I told no one. Not a soul. Not even my closest coworker. And the longer I looked, the stranger my mother's hints got. She kept mentioning one specific listing. A 4-bedroom on Maple Street. Good school district, she would say. A house like that holds its value. Room to grow. I had not told her I was looking. I remember a cold little feeling under my ribs every time Maple Street came up. Like hearing your own name in a conversation you are not part of. Like standing outside a window and watching people rearrange a room that is supposed to be yours. I did not have a word for it yet. I just knew I wanted a door that locked and a deed with one name on it. In February, I found the cottage on Linen Street. 2 bedrooms, a porch with a crooked step, a blue ceramic dish, the old owners left by the toaster. $285,000. I put down $57,000, 20%. 12 years of my life in one wire transfer. My realtor asked if my family wanted a walkthrough before closing. I said my family walks through things by voting on them. 40 minutes of paperwork to buy a house. It would take my family 4 months to make me regret the pen. Closing day was the first Friday in March. I signed. I shook hands. I drove to Linen Street and stood in my own kitchen with my own keys, and I did something I had been imagining for months. I texted a photo of the keys to the family group chat. One line. Surprise. I bought a house. Then I set the phone on the counter, and I just breathed. For the first time in 12 years, I breathed without calculating what it cost someone else. When I picked up the phone again, 11 missed calls. My parents' landline. My mother's cell. My mother's cell. My mother's cell. My mother's cell. No text saying congratulations. Nothing from Rachel at all. Not one emoji. Not one exclamation point. I called back standing in the empty kitchen. My mother answered before the first ring finished. There was a silence long enough that I said hello twice. Then my mother said, "You did this without consulting us. Not where is it, not how much. Not are you happy, sweetheart?" Not even a pause to let the news land. Consulting. Like I had sold a company out from under its board of directors. I laughed, honestly, because I thought she had to be halfway joking. "Mom, I am 34. It is a 2-bedroom cottage. Not a merger." My dad was on speaker. I could hear him breathing and not saying anything. Which is my dad's native language. Silence is where Frank Thornton lives. My mother's voice did not get louder. It got lower, and very calm. Which anyone in my family can tell you is the actual danger sign. When Carol Thornton gets quiet, you are not in an argument anymore. You are in a courtroom. "You have no idea what you have done," she said. And then she hung up on me. I stood there holding the phone in a house that still smelled like other people's paint. The kitchen was empty. The counters were bare. The only thing in the whole room was that blue ceramic dish by the toaster and the echo of my mother's voice saying, "You have no idea what you have done." She was right about that. I did not. But I was about to find out. And it would take an 8-year-old to show me. By Sunday, the phone tree had bloomed. If you are from a small church town, you know exactly what I mean. The phone tree is not a metaphor. It is infrastructure. It is a weapon. And my mother is its architect. Aunt Sharon texted first, "Call your mother. She is devastated about a cottage." Then my mother's cousin called to say that family was the only thing we take with us. Which was rich considering she once sued her own brother over a lawnmower. Then 2 ladies from First Methodist sent me nearly identical messages about how blessed I was and how blessings were meant to be shared. I want you to notice something I did not notice at the time but noticed later, lying awake at 3 in the morning. Nearly identical. The same phrases kept arriving from different mouths. Shared blessings. Family sticks together. Your poor mother. When 5 people call you selfish, using the same words, in the same order, somebody wrote those words. Somebody handed out a script. At the time, I just felt like I was going crazy. I had bought a house with my own money in my own town, 15 minutes from my parents, and my family was reacting like I had fled the country under a fake name. But the message that kept me up was not from an aunt. It was not from a church lady. It was from my sister. Rachel had said nothing for 2 full days. No congratulations. No exclamation points. None of her usual 12 emojis. Nothing. And then Sunday night, my phone buzzed once. So that is it then. That is all she wrote. 5 words. No punctuation. No emoji. Just a flat line on a heart monitor. I read it maybe 30 times. So that is it then. It was the voice of someone at the end of something. A person watching a door close. But I had not closed a door. I had opened my first one. I typed, "What does that mean?" and watched the dots appear and disappear. Appear and disappear. Like someone pacing behind glass. Like someone trying to find the words for a conversation they had already decided the ending of. No answer came. Everyone in my family seemed to be grieving the same loss at the same funeral. And I was the only one who had not seen the body. I want you to hold that image for a second. A family in mourning. A woman who just bought her first house. And no one will tell her what died. Because what died was a plan. And the plan had a name. It was mine. 3 weeks after closing, my mother summoned me to Sunday dinner on Warner Avenue. Summoned is the right word. The text read like a court date. Time. Address. No warmth. No question mark. I went because 22 years of training does not dissolve in 2 weeks. Dinner was pot roast and politeness, so thick you could spread it on bread. My dad talked about the weather twice. Rachel would not hold my eyes. She kept cutting June's food into smaller and smaller pieces long after June stopped eating. Mark kept saying the roast was great, which was more conversation than he usually managed around my parents. Every conversation kept dying in the middle, like the whole table was waiting for a cue nobody would give, like everyone had rehearsed their lines and was waiting for the director to call the scene. I kept eating, I kept passing dishes, I kept smiling. Then over dessert, my mother set down her fork and said to no one in particular, "The 4-bedroom on Maple is still available, you know. Good school district." The room went quiet in a specific way. Not surprised quiet. Not awkward quiet. Caught quiet. The quiet of people who have been talking about something behind your back and just heard it said out loud in front of you. I looked up. "How do you know what is available, Mom?" She smoothed the tablecloth. "People mention things. Here's what you need to understand." I had never once told my mother I was house hunting. Not the Maple listing. Not any listing. Not a word. Yet she knew that house was still available. Still. As in someone had been tracking it, watching it, waiting. Rachel stared into her coffee like it owed her money. My dad got very busy with a napkin, folding it, refolding it, the kind of busy that is actually hiding. And then Ava, my 8-year-old niece, she looked up from her ice cream with the pure administrative confidence of a third grader who has been briefed on a situation and asked Aunt Di, "Is your new house the one we are moving into?" Rachel said Ava, just her name. Fast and sharp as a mousetrap. Ava stopped. Her spoon hovered. The table restarted loudly all at once about nothing. About the weather again. About someone's garden. And I sat there with my spoon in the air. Finally, certain of one thing. Everyone in that room knew something I did not, and an 8-year-old had almost been the one to say it out loud. I got my answer that same night, from the only honest person in my family. After dinner, I was rinsing plates at the sink, and Ava climbed onto the counter stool next to me with her bowl of melting ice cream swinging her feet. She is a planner, Ava. She keeps lists. She organizes her crayons by color. She is 8 going on 40. And she said conversationally the way you would discuss a field trip. "Mom said when you got the new house, me and Cody get the big room and June sleeps with Mom and Dad till she is 5. My hands went still in the water. I kept my voice very light. "The new house. Your house," Ava said patiently, because grown-ups are slow. "When you got the big one. Mom and Grandma talk about it all the time." "Since when?" I asked. "Since before Christmas." "Since before Christmas." It was the end of March. 4 months. They had been planning my life for 4 months. Planning which bedrooms my nieces and nephew would sleep in. Planning where my sister would cook. Planning how my house would be divided. And I had not been in a single one of those conversations. I dried my hands. I walked into the living room. And I asked the question, straight out in front of everyone. Because I had learned something that spring that I wish I had learned at 12. Privacy is where my family does its best work. The worst things in my family have always been decided in rooms I was not invited into. Were Rachel and Mark planning to move into my house? Nobody said what. Nobody looked confused. Nobody's face did the thing a face does when it hears news for the first time. That is how I knew. Rachel closed her eyes. Mark studied the carpet like there would be a test on it later. My dad looked at my mother. And my mother looked relieved. Honest to God, relieved. Like a woman finally allowed to set down a bag she'd been carrying too long. "You were never supposed to hear it from Ava," she said. And then it all came out. Smooth as a rehearsed speech. Which it was. The plan. I buy the 4-bedroom on Maple. The house she had been steering me toward for months. Rachel, Mark, and the kids move in with me. A few years. That is all. Family helping family. Everyone had discussed it. Everyone had agreed. Everyone but me. I stood in my parents' living room and heard my own future described in the past tense, like it had already happened. Like my opinion was a formality they had simply forgotten to file. And when I finally asked the question that was burning a hole in my chest, "Why would you plan my life without asking me?" My mother looked genuinely puzzled. "What is yours?" "Is the family's, Diana. That is what family means." I said no in my parents' living room, and I want to tell you exactly how I said it, because I had rehearsed versions of that word my whole life and never once spent one. Not once. Not at 12 when they took the shoebox. Not at 16 when they took the college fund. Not at 25. Not at 30. I had never once said the word no to my family without a cushion around it, without a softening phrase, without an excuse. This time, I said it bare. I did not yell. I did not list 22 years of grievances. I did not cry. I said no. I am sorry this plan existed without me in it. But no. For a second, nobody moved. I do not think anyone in that room had ever heard the word from me without padding, without a smile attached, without a way out. They stared at me like I had started speaking a language they did not know I had learned. Then my mother recovered the way a chess player recovers, by moving the next piece. Fine, she said. Then, sell it. The Maple House is still on the market. Buy that one and we will help you look this time. We will help you look this time. We will help you look this time. That sentence told me everything about how they saw the last 12 years of my life. My cottage was not my home. It was a clerical error. The wrong box checked on a form. And the family was generously offering to help me fix my mistake. I said my house is not a mistake. It is not for sale and it is not available. Rachel finally spoke from the couch. Quiet, you have 2 bedrooms. Die. We have 3 kids. As if the math were the argument. As if the only problem with taking my house was that it might be too small. As if square footage was the issue and not the fact that no one in this room had ever once asked me what I wanted. Nobody in that room ever asked the question. I kept waiting for it. The simple one. The human one. Do you want to live with 5 other people, Diana? Nobody asked. Because my wanting had never been a line item in the family budget. My wanting was not something they accounted for. It was not something they tracked. It was not something they even believed existed. I picked up my coat and my keys and I left. And driving back to Linen Street, I actually felt lighter. Because I thought I had ended something. I thought no was the end of a sentence. I thought the hard part was over. In my family, no was not the end of a sentence. It was the start of a campaign. And the campaign began politely, the way everything in my family begins. With casseroles. That first week of April, Aunt Sharon appeared on my porch with a chicken casserole and a speech. She toured my cottage saying cozy the way some people say condemned. She sat at my kitchen table and explained that family takes care of family, that my grandmother's generation shared everything, that she just knew I would do the right thing once the shock wore off. The shock, mine apparently. The shock of behaving selfishly. The shock of buying a house with my own money and wanting to live in it alone. She was the first of many. Over 3 weeks, I received 2 more casseroles, 1 lasagna, a bundt cake, and a rotation of visitors who all seemed to be working from the same script. A church friend of my mother's texted that she was praying for me to soften my heart. My mother's cousin left a voicemail about how houses are temporary, but family is eternal, which as an accountant I can tell you is exactly backwards. The house has a 30-year mortgage and the family was currently treating me like a foreclosure. Here is the detail that got under my skin. Not one of them asked me a single question about my life. Not what the house was like. Not whether I was happy. Not why a woman who had saved for 12 years might want a door of her own. Not one question. Every conversation started at my obligation and ended at my selfishness. Like my actual self was a hallway they walked through to get between those 2 rooms. Like I was not a person, I was a corridor. I stayed polite. I froze the casseroles. I said I hear you so many times it stopped sounding like words. But at night I kept turning over the same cold thought. The aunts, the cousins, the church ladies, they all used the same phrases in the same order. Somebody had written the script, and I knew her handwriting. I had been reading it since I was 12 years old. In the middle of all of that, I almost surrendered. And I want to be honest about it, because this part matters more than anything I have told you so far. Mid-April, I drove to Warner Avenue to drop off a raincoat June had left in my car. I let myself in through the kitchen like I always did. And I stood there for a minute, unnoticed, just looking. There was an air mattress leaning against the living room wall, folded like a bad secret. Cody's sneakers were lined up on the stairs because there was no floor left in the boys' room. Through the doorway I could see June's crib mattress wedged beside my parents' bed. Rachel was at the stove stirring something, and my sister is 31 years old, but from the side in that light she looked 50. My mother stood at the sink and her back, When did my mother's back start curving like that? When did she start looking like someone carrying something she could not put down? Nobody was performing for me. Nobody knew I was there. It was just their actual life. 7 people breathing the same tired air. And it was hard. It was genuinely hard. I am not made of stone. I stood in the kitchen I grew up in, and felt the old machinery start up in my chest. The gears of the girl who understands. The gears that had been turning since I was 12. I could feel them spinning up. I could feel the yes building in my throat. I actually took out my phone. I had the realtor's number on the screen. 1 call. Was the Maple House still available? How fast could I sell? How fast could I undo my own freedom and hand it back? My thumb hovered over the call button. And then a different part of my brain spoke up. The accountant. Thank God for the accountant, she asked one quiet question. Wait. Why is my house the only option anyone has ever discussed? 7 people. A whole town. A whole economy of choices. Rentals. Assistance programs. Mark's brother in Columbus who has a spare room. A dozen roads they could have explored, and the family had run every single road through me. Every one. Like, I was the only bridge in town and they had decided everyone needed to cross. I put the phone away, but my thumb remembered where the button was. So I did what I do. I built a plan. If the problem was really housing, then housing has solutions. And I am very good at solutions. I spent a full weekend on it. I found 6 rental listings inside Ava School District, 3 of them, 3 bedrooms. I built Rachel and Mark a budget spreadsheet. Real numbers. What they would need, monthly. Where the gaps were. I looked up a nonprofit that helps families restart after a business failure, and I offered money, not vague money. Specific money. Application fees on every apartment they applied for, plus real help with the deposit. I printed all of it, put it in a folder, and brought it to Rachel at my parents' house on a Tuesday evening. Genuinely believing God help me that I was bringing good news. Rachel opened the folder, and I watched her face change as she turned the pages. It was not relief. She looked at my printouts like they were a summons, like I had handed her court papers. A spreadsheet, she said. You made us a spreadsheet. It is a plan raw. It is 6 actual apartments. We do not need a spreadsheet. Die. Her voice cracked in the middle. We need family. And there it was. The whole war in one short sentence, though I would not fully understand it for another 2 months. I was offering to solve the problem, but the problem was not the ask. I was the ask, my house, my roof. Me absorbed back into the household of us. That was the plan. And a stack of apartment listings was me refusing the plan while wearing a helpful costume. Mark came in halfway through, looked at the folder, looked at me, and walked back out without a word. At the time I read it as contempt. I was wrong about that. And it is one of the few things in this story I am glad I was wrong about. The Saturday after the spreadsheet, my dad showed up alone at the cottage. No call. No warning. I looked out the window and there was Frank Thornton's gray truck at the curb and my dad on my porch with his toolbox already frowning at the crooked step, like it had said something about my mother. This step is going to drop somebody, he said. That was the whole greeting. He did not mention the house that should have been Maple. He did not mention Rachel or the war or the spreadsheet or the campaign. He just fixed the step, pulled the board, cut a new one, set each nail with 2 clean strikes, while I sat on the porch rail with coffee and handed him things before he asked, which is the entire language the 2 of us speak fluently. When he was done, he packed the toolbox, squared it in his hand, and stood there a second, looking at the yard. Not at me. At the yard. Like the answer to something was out there in the grass. Then my dad, a man who volunteers roughly nothing, said, "Your mother is not wrong about everything, kiddo. She is just carrying more than she shows." I said, "Carrying what, Dad?" And I watched him almost say it. I have replayed that moment more times than I can count. His mouth opened, his jaw shifted, the truth got as far as his teeth. I could see it sitting there behind his lips like something alive that refused to come out. Then he tapped the new step once with his boot, said, "Keep paint on that," and drove home. I stood on my solid, level, honest porch step and understood exactly one thing. There was a number somewhere in my parents' life that I had not been given. A number my father knew and my mother was hiding. And my mother was doing all of this math around it in the dark. I would find that number in June, in a cardboard box. But before I tell you about that, I need to tell you about the key. Because the key is where this story stops being about a house and starts being about trust. And what happens when the last person you thought would betray you does. If you are listening to this and you have ever watched your father apologize for your mother with a toolbox instead of words, tell me about it in the comments. Because I read every single one. And if you are wondering what my parents were actually hiding under all that fury, stay with me. Subscribe right now because I did not see it coming either. And I do this for a living. In early May, I did something my therapist would have charged extra to hear about. I threw a housewarming and invited the entire family. Olive branch, white flag, call it what you want. I cleaned for 2 days. I made my grandmother's lemon bars from the recipe card in her own handwriting. The card is stained and soft and the corners are curled, and I set it on the counter like a scripture. And they came. All of them. My parents. Rachel and Mark and the kids. Aunt Sharon, 2 church ladies doing reconnaissance for 3 hours straight. It almost worked. Ava claimed the window seat in my office and read a whole chapter out loud to June. My dad walked the basement with a flashlight and pronounced my furnace better than it deserves to be, which from Frank Thornton is a love sonnet. My mother was careful and correct. She complimented my curtains the way you would compliment a rival's haircut. Precise, measured. Without warmth, but without malice either. And here is the detail that matters. The one I need you to hold on to because it is going to come back. By my toaster sits a small blue ceramic dish. The previous owners left it behind. I liked it, so I kept it. And that is where I kept my spare key. It sat there all afternoon in plain sight. People in and out of my kitchen for 3 hours, refilling drinks, cutting lemon bars, admiring the window over the sink, walking past that dish a dozen times. The party ended around 6. Hugs at the door, leftovers in foil, tail lights down Linen Street. I washed dishes, dried them, put the kettle on, and then I stopped. The blue dish was empty. I stood there with the dish towel over my shoulder and told myself it fell. It got moved. A kid was playing with it. Ava probably. She likes shiny things. I searched the counter, the drawer, the floor, the trash bag by the back door, coat pockets I had not worn since March, under the toaster, behind the microwave, inside the oven. It was 10 o'clock before I let myself sit down and think the actual thought. Nobody broke into my house that night. The doors were locked all evening. The windows were latched. Nobody came in who was not invited. Somebody had just made sure they would never have to be invited again. I want to be very careful about what I say next, because I never found out for certain whose pocket that key left in. I have my suspicions. I have a mental shortlist. But I have decided I do not want to know. Because knowing would mean naming someone. And naming someone in my family means choosing a target for a grief that has nowhere else to go. Here is what I did instead of accusing anyone. Monday morning, I called the locksmith. By Wednesday, both doors had new locks and the back door had a deadbolt that could stop a grudge cold. I did not announce it. I did not text the family group chat. I did not post anything pointed on social media. I just quietly made my house mine again. Because a lock is not an argument. It is a fact. And I deal in facts. The locksmith was a cheerful guy who talked about his fantasy football league the whole time. He did not know what he was installing or why. He was just drilling holes and setting pins. And when he left, he said what they always say. You would be surprised who has keys to people's houses. I said I was past surprised. That night was the low point of the whole spring for me, and I will tell you why. Because it was not fear. I was not afraid of my family. I was afraid of what my family had become to me. I sat on my kitchen floor. Actually, on the floor, back against the cabinets like a teenager, holding the new keys on their little paper tag, and I cried for the first time since closing day. It had nothing to do with burglars. It was the direction the lock was pointing. 34 years old and I was installing hardware against my own family. Every clean tooth on those new keys said the same thing. You were right not to trust them, and being right felt like swallowing a stone. I put the spare key in a place I will not be sharing on the internet. The blue dish stayed on the counter. Empty. I could have put it away. Thrown it out. But I left it there on purpose, the way you leave a scar visible so you remember where the wound is. Some part of me already knew that key was going to come back into the story. I just did not know it would arrive holding a moving truck. Now I have to tell you about the box. Because this is where the story stops being about a house and starts being about everything. Every year since I got my accounting license, I have done my parents' taxes. Every February, my mother hands me a shoebox of receipts like a queen granting a charter. Except this year. This year, we were at war. So in February, my mother informed me through my father that they would manage. April came and went. They filed an extension, which I knew because my dad muttered it at the housewarming like a man reporting a crop failure. Just leaned over and set it into his coffee like he was talking to the mug. We filed an extension, like it was a confession he could not hold anymore. Then one evening in the middle of June, Frank Thornton's gray truck pulled up to my cottage again, and my dad carried a cardboard box up my repaired step and set it on the kitchen table. Your mother cannot face the box, he said. Do not tell her I brought it. He did not stay. He did not sit down. He did not drink coffee. He set the box down and he left. And the way he walked back to his truck told me something I would not understand for another hour. The way a man walks when he knows what you are about to find. I made tea. I started sorting. And honestly, it was soothing. Receipt. Pension statements. The familiar shape of my parents' modest, careful life. I had a system going. Little stacks across the table. Income here. Deductions there. Medical expenses in a pile by the salt shaker. And then I picked up a form and the evening went quiet. It was a 1098. That is the form a lender sends showing mortgage interest you paid during the year. Except my parents paid off Warner Avenue 10 years ago. I was at the barbecue. There was a cake shaped like a house. My mother cried. My father did not cry, but he stood on the porch for 20 minutes after everyone left, just looking at the house like it was a monument. I read the form again. A home equity line of credit, secured against Warner Avenue, opened a little over 2 years ago. Balance. $85,000. I sat there with the form in my hand while my tea went cold. Doing the one piece of math I had never thought to do. My parents' house. The one thing they owned free and clear. The one thing they had built their whole life around. Was not free and clear anymore. They had mortgaged it. They had borrowed against it, and the date on that loan lined up with something. With someone. 2 years ago. Mark's business. Rachel crying on Warner Avenue. 7 people in a 4-bedroom house. The math was not hard. The math was devastating. I called my dad the next morning. I said 6 o'clock. My porch. Just you. He came. He sat on the top step, the one he had fixed. His forearms on his knees, his hands hanging loose between them. The posture of a man who has been waiting for this conversation for 2 years. I put the 1098 down next to him. And he looked at it the way you look at weather coming in. Not surprised. Not scared, just tired. The tired of a man who has been watching a storm approach and finally let it arrive. Then he told me everything. In that flat machinist voice, sanding each sentence smooth before handing it over. The way he sands everything. The way he sands his own feelings down to nothing so they do not splinter anyone. 2 years ago, Mark's business was dying, not dead. Dying. That awful stage where money can still theoretically save it if you pour enough in fast enough. Rachel came to Warner Avenue crying about losing their house, about the kids, about starting over with nothing. And my mother, who watched her own family lose a house when she was a girl, who never talked about it but never forgot it, who carried that loss in her spine the way some people carry old injuries, decided that would not happen to her daughter. So my parents took out an $85,000 line of credit against a paid-off house. And they poured it into Mark's company, and the company died anyway, and it took Rachel's house with it. Now the payment on that loan comes out of a machinist's pension and Social Security every single month. And it is winning. The payment is eating them alive. Slowly, the way termites eat a house, from the inside, where you cannot see it until the floor gives way. The plan, my dad said, that was the way out. You in a bigger place with Rachel's crew. Us selling Warner, paying off the loan, getting one of those condos by the church, downsizing, landing soft. He rubbed his thumb along the stepboard, back and forth, the same motion he uses when he is sanding something. It all worked. Die. On paper, it all worked. Every road ran through you. And now I finally knew why. I was not just the reliable one. I was the bridge. The only bridge still standing. The one asset in the family that had not been spent, or barred against, or broken yet. And everyone had been trying to walk across me to the other side of their ruin. I asked him the only question left. Why did not anybody just ask me? My dad was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the porch went dark around us and the street light clicked on. Then he said your mother gave up nursing school to raise her brothers. Nobody asked her either, Dee. She does not know another way. He stood up, tapped the step with his boot, and drove home to his mortgaged house. And I sat on that step in the dark and understood something about my mother that I had never understood before. She was not greedy, she was not cruel, she was a woman who had been taken from so early and so completely that she had learned to take as a form of love. She did not know the difference, because nobody had ever shown her. My mother found out I knew within a week, because Warner Avenue has thin walls, and my parents have been married 40 years, and secrets in that house have a half-life of about 6 days. She did not call, she showed up at my office, of all places, on a Thursday at lunch, and asked the receptionist for me like she was picking up a prescription, not here to see my daughter, here to collect something that is mine. We sat in a little conference room with the bat coffee, the fluorescent lights, the framed certificates on the wall, and I watched my mother, my proud, upright church office mother, decide to stop fighting me with aunts and casseroles and church ladies and try the one weapon she had never used on me, the truth. Aimed carefully. So now you know, she said. I said I did. Her chin came up, the way it always does when she's about to say something she has rehearsed. Then you know you could fix all of this, Diana. She laid it out, the whole clean machine of it. Sell the cottage, buy the Maple House, take in the Doyles. They sell Warner Avenue, clear the loan. Everyone lands soft, everyone survives, everyone keeps their dignity because the help came from inside the family and stayed inside the family. One signature, she said. And her voice did something I had never heard it do in a fight. Not in 34 years of fights. It shook. One yes from you and this whole nightmare is over for everybody. For everybody. I looked at my mother across that laminate table. And for the first time in this entire war, she looked old to me. Not old like a number. Old like a feeling. 63 years of holding other people's ceilings up with her spine. And the spine was tired. The spine was bowing. The spine was asking someone else to hold it up for once. And some part of me, some ugly, honest part, had waited my whole life to be this necessary. That is the truth the reliable one does not say out loud. The wound wants the job. The emptiness where love should be aches for usefulness instead. Because usefulness is measurable and love is not. Because usefulness comes with a receipt and love does not. My hands actually itched for a pen. I said quiet as I could. Mom, I cannot be the plan. I can help, but I cannot be the plan. She gathered her purse like a verdict, like a judge collecting her papers after reading the sentence, and she left. That night my phone buzzed, the family group chat. A screenshot from Rachel. A U-Haul reservation for Saturday. I still do not know if that screenshot was a mistake or a warning. Rachel says mistake. Ava, who is honest, says her mom cried while typing it, so make of that what you will. Either way, Saturday came, and I did something that surprised even me. I went to work. Extension season at an accounting firm does not take weekends off. And I sat at my desk running other people's numbers because some stubborn, hopeful animal in my chest refused to believe my family would actually do it. Would actually show up at my house with a truck. Would actually try to move into a home I owned without my permission, without my presence, without even a phone call. At 11:40, my phone rang. Mrs. Alvarez, my next-door neighbor, 71 years old, retired school teacher. Sharpest eyes on Linen Street. The kind of woman who notices a new crack in the sidewalk and files it mentally. "Diana, honey," she said, in the exact voice you would use for "there is smoke coming from your kitchen. There is a moving truck in your driveway." I asked her to describe what she saw. And she did. Like the professional witness she was born to be. A U-Haul backed in. Ramp down. A man carrying boxes onto your porch. Children on your lawn. And a woman at your front door, trying a key that will not turn, trying it again, stepping back to look at the door like the door had betrayed her. My sister, standing on my welcome mat, with the key from the blue ceramic dish, discovering 6 weeks too late that the locks on my house no longer matched the plan for my house. "Should I call someone?" Mrs. Alvarez asked. And I said, "You just did. I am on my way." The drive from my office to Linen Street takes about 20 minutes, and I want to tell you what those 20 minutes felt like, because it was not what I expected. No shaking hands, no racing heart, no tears. I drove the speed limit the whole way, calmer than I had been in 4 months. The calmest I have ever been in my life was the day I should have been screaming, because between exits, somewhere on Route 4, the last soft, hopeful thing in me finished dying. The part that still believed my family would come to their senses. The part that still believed someone would call and say, "Wait, stop, turn around." The part that still believed that if I was good enough and patient enough and understanding enough, they would eventually see me as a person and not a resource. That part died on Route 4. And what is left when that dies is very, very steady. Here is the scene I pulled up to, and the scene half my neighborhood pulled back curtains to watch. A U-Haul in my driveway with its ramp down, a dozen boxes stacked on my porch, June asleep in her car seat on the lawn, Cody driving a toy truck through my flower bed, Ava sitting on the steps hugging her backpack, and my mother's sedan parked across the street. Because Rachel had called for backup when the key failed. I got out of my car. Rachel started talking before my door shut. It was temporary. They had meant to call. Everything with the truck was half price on weekends. Words in the order panic delivers them. Sentences that were not sentences. Just noise shaped like excuses. Mark, to his credit, had stopped moving boxes and just stood there with his empty hands at his sides. A man visibly wishing to be anywhere else on earth. A man who knew this was wrong and had come anyway because his wife and his mother-in-law had told him this was the plan. I walked up my own front path. And I said, not loud, "You need to load those boxes back on the truck." And my mother came across the street saying we would all discuss it inside, and moved toward my porch like the matter was already settled. Like my no was a placeholder. Like the truck in my driveway was a negotiation that just needed a room and some coffee and enough pressure to resolve. And that is when it happened. The sentence left me before I planned it, before I could catch it, before I could cushion it or soften it or wrap it in understanding. "You need to leave my property." My property, to my own mother, in front of my niece, in front of the neighborhood. The words landed on that lawn like a dropped dish. And everything stopped. Even Cody's truck noises stopped. Even the wind seemed to stop. My mother went white, then very still, and she pulled herself up to her full height. And she gave me, in front of the children and the boxes and Mrs. Alvarez's unapologetic window, one more recital of the family creed. What is yours is the family's, Diana. That is what family means. I stood on the step my father fixed, and I heard myself answer, "Then I guess I am not family today." They loaded the boxes. It took 40 minutes, and I watched all 40. Arms folded, dying inside and refusing to look like it, standing on my own porch like a sentry. Like a woman guarding something that everyone around her believed was already theirs, The U-Haul pulled away at 4:15. By 6 o'clock I was a monster in 4 group chats I was not even in. I know this because Aunt Sharon accidentally forwarded me one of them. The thread was titled, Diana's Situation. Like I was a weather event, like I was a problem to be managed. The silence afterward had a temperature. Weeks of it. Cold and specific. No Sunday dinner summons, which I expected, but also no photos of the kids in the family chat. Someone had quietly removed me from the group. I found out when I tried to send Ava a message about her science project and saw I could not post anymore. Cody's birthday came and went in early August. I heard about the party from a bakery cashier who assumed I had been there. She said, "Oh, your sister picked up the dinosaur cake. Your mom was so excited. That one I carried around for days. Like a splinter I could not dig out. Like a small sharp thing buried under my skin that reminded me every time I moved that I had been erased." My mother told her circle I had chosen a house over her grandchildren. And the phrasing traveled the way her phrasings always do. Through church, through the grocery store, through the PTA, like a virus with good manners. And then on a Tuesday night my phone rang, and the screen said, "Nana Ruth, my grandmother is 85, and does not call people. She summons them through intermediaries like royalty. If Nana Ruth is calling you directly, something has shifted in the kingdom." I answered, expecting the final boss of the guild campaign. The last wave. The heaviest artillery. Instead, my grandmother said, "I hear you told Carol no." I braced. And she said, "Huh." A long, interested huh. Like a woman tasting something new. Like a woman who has been eating the same meal for 60 years and just tasted a different spice. And then she told me a story I had never heard in my life. A story my mother had never told me. A story that had been buried in the same dirt as my shoebox and my college fund, and every other thing my family took without asking. When my mother was 19, she got into nursing school. There was an acceptance letter. It sat on the kitchen table on Nana's farm for 3 days. Propped against the salt shaker. My mother walked past it for 3 days, touching it, reading it, letting it be real. That same week, my great-grandfather lost his job at the mill. And there were 3 boys still at home to feed. And Carol was the oldest, and the letter disappeared off the table. And nobody ever spoke of it again. "Your mother cried in my kitchen one night," Nana said, "and then she never mentioned it again. I let her not mention it. That was my mistake, child, not hers." I sat with that for a long moment. The room was quiet. The phone was warm against my ear, and I felt something I had not felt in months. Not anger. Not grief. Recognition. The shape of my mother's life suddenly made sense. The shape of mine had been built inside it. Like a house inside a house. Like a room inside a room that has no door. Then I asked what I should do, and my grandmother declined to answer because she is Nana. "Come to my birthday," she said. "Whatever you decide it," standing up. "I need to show you the worst hour of this whole story. And it does not have any yelling in it. There is no confrontation, no moving truck, no family on my lawn. It is just me. My kitchen table. And a laptop at 2 in the morning. 11 days before my grandmother's birthday, I opened a spreadsheet, of course I did. Because I am Diana Thornton, and I solve things with numbers, and I had run out of numbers that made sense. Across the top, I typed a question I had never let myself write down. What would it cost to buy them back? Column A, the money. Paying off my parents' loan meant $85,000. I had what was left of my savings after the down payment. It was not enough. Not close. Getting there meant borrowing against my retirement account. 6 years of repayments. My safety net gone at 34 with a brand new mortgage on my back, and nothing left to catch me if I fell. I typed it all in anyway. Every number, every cost, every year of repayment. The math was clean and it was ugly and it was true. My cursor sat there blinking, waiting for column B. Then I added column B, and I labeled it what it buys. And that is where the night got honest. Because I know this family ledger. I have been keeping it since I was 12. I know every entry, Every debit, every credit, every silent transaction where I gave something and received a smile in return. Empty the shoebox, get the warm smile. The smile lasts until the next water heater. Pay for Ava's summer camp, get called generous. Generous lasts until the next school supply list. Co-sign the car loan, get thanked at Thanksgiving. The thanks lasts until the next favor that cannot be refused. Pay off their loan and I would not be buying my family back. I would be renewing my lease with them. Same terms. Bigger payment. The smile would last exactly as long as it took for the next crisis to arrive. And in my family, the next crisis is always arriving. It is always one phone call away. One broken water heater. One failed business. One letter with a government seal. In the last cell of column B at 2:40 in the morning, I typed a single word. Rent. I looked at that word until my eyes burned. Until the letters blurred and reformed and blurred again. Rent. That is what I had been paying. Not with money, with years, with dreams, with a blue 10-speed bike I never got, with a promotion I never took, with a door I never locked. 22 years of rent, and the lease never ended. And the landlord never raised the rent because the rent was invisible. That was the trick. That was the genius of my family's system. The price was never named, so you could never negotiate it and you could never refuse it, and you could never point to a bill and say, this is too much. Then I closed the laptop without saving, which for an accountant is practically arson. And I went to bed. Let me stop and ask you something honestly. Friend to friend, have you ever sat at a kitchen table in the middle of the night doing the math on buying back your own family? Adding up what it would cost to be loved? Calculating the price of belonging as if it were a line item you could pay off and be done with. If that is you, put it in the comments. Not for me, for the next woman scrolling at 2 in the morning who thinks she is the selfish one. She is not. And neither were you. And stay with me here, because what I decided to bring to my grandmother's birthday instead of that check. That is the part of this story I am actually proud of. Subscribe if you want the ending. It is close now, and it is worth it. The answer when it finally came did not come from the spreadsheet. It came from a door frame. That weekend I was clearing out the hall closet, moving in work, the kind that takes months, the kind nobody helps you with because nobody knows you are doing it. I pulled up the old shelf liner, and underneath it on the closet door frame, I uncovered something the previous owners had left behind. They had painted around it instead of painting over it. Pencil marks. Little horizontal dashes climbing the frame. Each one dated. Each one labeled in a parent's handwriting. Emmy age 6. Emmy age 8. Emmy age 10. A second column lower. Ben age 4. Ben age 6. 20 years of some other family's Tuesdays. A child standing against a wall while a parent marked how tall they had gotten. A ritual so small and so ordinary that nobody would think to preserve it. And yet, here it was, preserved under shelf liner in a house that now belonged to me. I sat down on the closet floor, and I looked at those marks for a long time. This is what a house is, I thought, not square footage, not an asset with bedrooms to be assigned by committee before the owner is consulted, not a line on a spreadsheet, not a solution to someone else's loan. A house is the wall you measure your years against. The place where someone stands you up against the frame and says, look how much you have grown. The place where the marks accumulate, where the evidence of your life collects in pencil and date and inch. Nobody had ever asked me what I was measuring mine against. Nobody had ever stood me against a wall and said, look how far you have come. They had only ever said, look how much more you can give. And sitting there on the closet floor, I finally understood what I actually wanted to say to my family. And it was not just no. No was true. But it was only half of me. The other half. The accountant. The aunt who buys school supplies. The woman who understands. She needed a voice too. Or I would walk out of that birthday party having amputated something instead of having grown it. I would have cut off my arm to save my hand and ended up with neither. What I wanted to say was not like this. Ask me and watch what I will do. Take me hostage and watch the door. So I got up off the closet floor, and I got a folder. A good one, the leather kind. And I started building what I was going to put on my grandmother's table. 3 things. It took me 9 days. 2 phone calls I was scared to make, and 1 checkbook. The invitation to Nana Ruth's 85th birthday dinner arrived by mail. Because my grandmother believes group texts are for hostage negotiations. Cream card stock, her spidery cursive, dinner at her house. The last Saturday of August, and an hour after the mail came, only I got one, I later confirmed, a follow-up text from my mother. The first direct word she had sent me since the lawn. Come ready to be part of this family again. I read that sentence maybe 50 times. And I want to give my mother credit because it is a masterpiece. 8 decades of family diplomacy compressed into one line that offers you everything and tells you the price without naming it. Come ready to surrender. It meant come ready to sign. The door's open and the toll is everything you said no to a year ago. Honestly, 4 months ago, that sentence would have worked on me. That is the thing about being the girl who understands. You can be managed with almost nothing. A cold text, a warm smile. The promise that the temperature might change. The promise that if you just comply the weather will improve. But I had spent the summer learning the difference between being loved and being leased, so I ironed my green dress. I confirmed with Nana by mail, like a civilized person. And the night before the party, I sat at my kitchen table and went through the folder one last time. Every page, every number. The check paper clipped where I would see it first. I slept better than I had any right to. My mother had planned a birthday dinner, and what she had actually built was a stage. With my seat marked and the audience preloaded and the lighting designed so that when I stood up everyone would be looking at me and the only exit would be through her. Fine. I had learned something about stages that summer watching her work. The calmest person in the room owns it, and nobody in my family had ever seen me be exactly as calm as I was planning to be. My grandmother's dining room holds a table long enough to seat 20, under a lace cloth that has survived 4 wars in this family. That Saturday it was full. My parents. The Doyles. Aunt Sharon and her husband. 2 great aunts. The church ladies. Cousins I see at funerals. Place cards, which Nana never uses, my mother's handwriting on everyone. My seat was between Aunt Sharon and the deafest of the great aunts, surrounded, in the polite way. The way you surround someone so they cannot leave without making a scene. I ate, I passed the rolls, I complimented the ham like everyone else, and I watched my mother run the table the way a conductor runs an orchestra. Every conversation started and stopped on her cue. Every silence was hers, every laugh was timed. I kept the folder in my bag under my chair, and I waited. We sang. Nana blew out her candles with June on her lap. And it was, I will say it, almost lovely. For a moment the war did not exist. For a moment, we were just a family, singing to an old woman who had outlived most of her arguments. Then, while the coffee was being poured, my mother stood up and touched her glass with a spoon. She thanked everyone for coming. She said how much family meant tonight of all nights. And then she turned to me, warm as a heat lamp, and said, "And we are so glad Diana is here because we are hoping tonight she will finally give this family her answer. Rachel and the children need a home sweetheart, so is it going to be your sister? Or is it going to be that house?" Silence with china in it. 20 faces turned to me like a jury that had carpooled. Ava stopped mid-bite and looked at her mother, then at me. Somebody's spoon clinked embarrassed. My mother stayed standing, gracious and terrible, holding the room she had built and offering me in front of all of it, her famous 2 doors. Surrender or exile. Those were the only options on the menu. Those had always been the only options. In my family, there was never a third door. There was never a choice that did not cost you something. There was only the question of what you were willing to pay and how loudly you were willing to pay it. I put my napkin on the table, and I stood up, because Nana Ruth had told me to decide it standing. "Okay," I said. "Let us answer it properly." I did not raise my voice. If anything, I lowered it. I gave the room accountant voice. Year-end review voice. The tone I use for clients whose numbers have stopped agreeing with their stories. The tone that says, "I am not angry. I am not emotional. I am precise. And precision is more dangerous than volume." Before I answer, I said I want to make sure we are all answering the same question, so let me say the whole thing out loud one time. And I did. The plan discussed since before Christmas. At tables I was not invited to. About where my sister's family would live. In a house I had not bought yet. A plan everyone in this room had heard before I had. The 4-bedroom on Maple Street I was steered toward for months. Like a cow steered toward a chute. My spare key, which left my kitchen in someone's pocket in May, during a party where I served lemon bars and pretended everything was fine. The moving truck. That meant my new locks in July. On a Saturday morning while I was at work because I still believed my family would not actually do it. And the loan. I said it plainly. Without cruelty. Because Frank Thornton's daughter owed him that much. 2 years ago, Mom and Dad borrowed $85,000 against Warner Avenue to try to save Mark's business. It did not work. The payment is eating their retirement alive. That is the engine under all of this. That is why it had to be me. The room did not gasp. Look around a family table when the truth finally sits down at it. Nobody is shocked. Because everyone already knew. Everyone had been carrying this number in their chest like a stone and pretending it was not there. The aunt studied their coffee. Mark stared at his hands. My mother's chin came up. And her voice, for the first time in my 34 years of studying it, went loud, cracked, loud. The voice of a wall finally giving way. You have no right. And I said gently, Mom, Rachel needs 4 walls. What you have been asking all year is for me to be the walls. I let it sit. I let it fill the room, like water fills a low place. I let every person at that table hear it and decide where it landed in their own chest. Then I reached under my chair, and I lifted the folder onto the lace tablecloth. But I did not come here to say no. I came to show you what yes looks like when somebody actually asks me. I opened the folder, and I took out 3 things. And I walked them down the table like I was dealing the last hand of the night. The first was a check. Rachel. Mark. There is a 3-bedroom apartment on Delamere Court, 11 minutes from Ava's school. I toured it Tuesday. The manager's holding it until the 1st. I set the check in front of my sister. That is first and last month. It is made out to the property company. Not to you. Not to Mom. To the landlord. It is a housewarming. It has your names on the lease and nobody's name on the favor. Rachel looked at the check, and her mouth folded in on itself. And Mark put his hand flat on the table like a man steadying a boat in rough water. The second thing was a stack of paper in a binder clip. I set it in front of my father. Dad. That is a restructure package for the loan. A longer term, a lower monthly payment. Numbers that fit a pension. I ran it 4 ways. The math holds. You keep Warner Avenue. You do not sell anything. I will prepare the whole application and sit with you at the bank. No charge. Obviously. I am your daughter. I am also the best accountant you know. My father put 2 fingers on that binder clip, like it was a bird that might startle and fly away. Like he was afraid to hold it too tightly because it might disappear. And the third thing I took out was a single blank sheet of paper. And that one I carried the length of the table. Past the aunts, past the cousins, past the church ladies, and I set it down in front of my mother. She stared at it. What is this? That is the page I said where somebody for once asks me what I want. It has been blank for 22 years, Mom. I keep waiting. Her hands were shaking. The room was so still I could hear the kitchen clock. Tick, tick, tick. Like the room itself was counting down to something. One condition covers all of it, I said. My house is not on this table. It never will be, and my mother, because she is who her life made her, stood up and played the last card in the deck. The one she had been saving. The one she had never used because she never needed to, because nothing in 22 years had ever required a card this heavy. If you walk out that door, Diana, do not you dare come back. And I looked at my mother, 63 years old, standing at a lace tablecloth in her daughter's grandmother's dining room. playing the same card that had been played on her when she was 19. Walk away and do not come back. The threat of exile. The nuclear option. The only language she had ever been taught. Love you have to keep paying for is not love, Mom. I picked up my coat off the chair. It is rent. I have paid 22 years of it. I am done renting. And into that silence my grandmother's voice, old and dry as the lace, let her go, Carol. You of all people know what it costs to stay. I kissed Nana on the head on my way out. Happy birthday, I said. I walked through the front door not knowing, truly not knowing. Really not knowing whether anything I had left on that table would still be there in the morning, whether the check would be cashed or torn up, whether the restructure package would be read or thrown away, whether the blank page would stay blank, or whether someone would finally pick up a pen and write on it. I did not know if I had just saved my family or destroyed it. I did not know if I had been generous or cruel. I did not know if I was the villain or the hero of this story, or neither or both. The chimes on Nana's door rang behind me, and nobody followed. And I stood on the dark porch and let both of those facts be true at once. Nobody followed me out. And the wind chimes rang like they were applauding or like they were mourning. I could not tell which. I cried on the drive home, and I want to be precise about why, because it was not regret, it was not relief, it was not grief exactly. It was the crying that happens when you finally see the whole shape of something you have been living inside your whole life, and the shape is smaller and sadder than you ever let yourself believe. Somewhere on Route 4 between my grandmother's porch light and mine, I finally saw it. The shoebox. The smile. The 22 years. The bike I never got. The college fund that became braces. The promotion I never took. The apartment above the laundromat. The keys on the counter. The moving truck on my lawn. I had spent my life confusing being needed with being loved. And you can run a long way on that fuel. Ask my mother, who ran 44 years on it, all the way from a farm kitchen where an envelope disappeared off a table, who never got to go to nursing school, who never got to be asked what she wanted, who learned that love was a debt you paid with your body and your future and your dreams and your spine, and who passed that debt to her daughter like an inheritance she did not know she was leaving. She and I had been paying on the same loan our whole lives. She just never got to see the paperwork. She never got to sit at a table at 2 a.m. and type the word rent into a spreadsheet and understand what it meant. Tonight, I had walked out of the bank. I pulled onto Lennon Street around 10 o'clock. My porch light was on. I had left it on for myself, which felt suddenly like the whole point of everything. Like the entire story could be compressed into that one act. A woman leaving a light on for herself because no one else was going to. I sat in the driveway a minute, looking at the little house I had been called selfish all summer for loving. 2 bedrooms, a crooked step my father made straight, a blue dish with nothing in it, a closet door frame with someone else's pencil marks. And it occurred to me, turning the new key in my new lock, that this was the first night of my life when nobody on earth knew where I was but me. No chart, no committee, no assignment. No plan drafted at tables I was not invited to. It felt like grief, and it felt like mine. And I was still learning that those can be the same feeling. That freedom can feel like loss. That losing the role can feel like losing the family. That standing on your own porch with your own key in your own lock can feel like the loneliest thing you have ever done. And also the first true thing you have ever done. Then, for 3 days, my family went completely silent. Not the cold silence of the campaign. Not the strategic silence of phone trees and casserole deployments. Just silence. The silence after something breaks and before anyone knows whether it can be put back together. On the 4th day, my phone lit up with the name I expected least. Mark. My brother-in-law. A man who had rarely said an unnecessary sentence to me in 9 years. Whose pride had been sleeping on his in-laws' fold-out couch for 18 months, who had walked out of the room when I showed his wife the spreadsheet, who had stood on my lawn with empty hands wishing to be anywhere else. His text came through on a Wednesday morning, and I still have it. I have never deleted it. I read it sometimes when I forget what the point was. Rachel dropped your check at the landlord's this morning. We got the apartment. The kids saw their rooms. Ava picked the one with the window seat. I am sorry about your porch. Thank you. I sat at my desk and read it until the letters blurred. Until the words stopped being words and became something else. Became a door opening. Became the first person walking through it. The proudest man in the family was the first one through the door I had built. Not my mother. Not my sister. Not the aunts or the church ladies or the cousins. The man who had said almost nothing for 9 years. The man who had been too ashamed to speak. He was the one who picked up the check and brought it to the landlord and texted me the words, "I am sorry and thank you," in the same breath. And that is how I learned the difference between people who need help and people who need you. The ones who actually need help will take it with both hands. Even when it does not come wrapped in surrender. Even when it does not cost them their dignity. Even when it arrives in a folder instead of a moving truck. A week later, Rachel texted like nothing had ever happened. Which is Rachel. Still on for school pickup Tuesdays. No capital letters. No apology. No acknowledgement of the war or the truck or the key or the check. Just a bridge made of logistics. A connection that does not require feelings. A way back. That does not require anyone to say the words that would make it real. I took it. Bridges do not have to be pretty. They just have to hold. My father came by that Sunday and fixed the gate latch, which was not broken. He had driven 15 minutes with his toolbox to fix something that did not need fixing because that is how Frank Thornton says I am still here. That is how he says I heard you. That is how he says I am proud of you without using any of those words. He drank 1 cup of coffee. And sat at the door. And said the bank took the application. That was his whole speech. 6 words. The most I had heard him say voluntarily in months. The restructure went through in October. The payment fits the pension now. And Warner Avenue is not going anywhere. My parents are keeping their house. My father is sleeping in his own bed in the room he has slept in for 40 years. And the loan is still there, but it is manageable. It is a number that breathes instead of a number that drowns. Nobody thanked me publicly. There was no group text, no announcement at church, no moment where my mother stood up and said my daughter saved our house. Because in my family gratitude is private. Gratitude is something you feel alone in your kitchen at midnight and never say out loud. In my family, the check is cashed, and the silence is the thank you, and you learn to hear it in the silence if you listen right. My mother's name stayed silent in my phone all fall. Almost all fall. It is November now. Saturday mornings. Once a month, there are pancakes at my house. Ava. Cody. June. Flour everywhere. Syrup on the counter. Laughter in a kitchen that was empty a year ago. And a new column of pencil marks starting at my closet door frame right beside Emmy's and Ben's. Ava. Age 8. Measured and dated in my handwriting. She stands against that frame like she is being knighted, straight back, chin up, waiting for the pencil. And when I mark it, she looks at the line and says, "I grew," and I say, "Yes, you did." My birthday came 2 weeks ago. In the mail between a utility bill and a furnace flyer, 1 cream-colored card. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. Inside, a printed birthday verse. The kind you buy at a drugstore. And under it, no note. No paragraph. No speech. No conditions, just Mom. I stood at the counter and held it a while. 2 letters and a signature. After everything. After the 11 calls, and the phone tree and the casseroles and the key and the truck and the lawn and the courtroom at my grandmother's table. 2 letters. I held that card like it was made of glass because in my family, 2 letters is a cathedral. 2 letters is my mother learning a new language, 1 syllable at a time. The aunts still tell their version at church. I have stopped auditing it. Some ledgers you close, not because they balance, but because you are done carrying them. Because the weight of being right is heavier than the weight of being wrong, and both of them are heavier than the weight of letting it go. And then last Sunday, Nana Ruth came for pancakes, summoned herself, arrived like weather, inspected the whole house with her cane, pronounced the window seats sensible, which is Nana for perfect. Before she left, I did the thing I had been planning for a month. I took her hand, and I pressed a key into it. Brand new, cut Thursday, shiny as a dime. Then I dropped it where she could watch me do it. Into the blue ceramic dish by the toaster, where anyone in my kitchen can see it, where it sits in plain sight the way the old one did. The difference is, nobody took this one. I gave it. Given is different from taken, Nana. My grandmother looked at the dish, and then at me, and nodded once like a judge, like a woman who has been watching a case for a year and finally heard the verdict. 22 years, child, she said. Some locks take longer. Here is what I know now, and I will keep it short because I have learned the short version is the true one. Family is not the people who are allowed to take from you without asking. Family is not the people who plan your life at tables you are not invited to. Family is not a loan you pay with your dreams and your spine and your door. Family is the people who knock even when they have a key. That is my story. One house. One stood in cable and one had her name on it. One blank page that is still waiting for a pen. One door frame with pencil marks climbing it. One blue dish that is no longer empty. If this reminded you that no is a complete sentence even at your mother's table, take that as your sign. If this reminded you that being needed is not the same as being loved, and that the difference is the distance between a prison and a home, take that as your sign too.